My new pantorouter machine is far from done, but before I finish everything, I want to get it to the point where I can do some test cuts, because I'm keen to see how well it works. So I'm checking that when I move across here, this moves parallel with the table. Otherwise the pantograph might be mounted crooked or the rotor is crooked in here, but it looks parallel enough. So I was planning on going into details on aligning this, but this is actually pretty close already. I don't think I need to tweak this. If it was off, the thing to check is that this shaft is parallel to the mount, and it's also parallel to the pins, and that the pins are parallel to the table, and debug it that way. But I think I got lucky on this one. Now I want to make a template to make a 1/2" tenon using a 1/2" rotor bit, and the formula I always use is tenon thickness plus rotor bit thickness times 2 is equal to follower bearing plus template. So given that the tenon and the rotor bit are both 1 inch, we have to double that, which means the template plus the bearing need to be this big, which means my template needs to be basically this width here. I'm adding a slot to the middle of the tenon template so I can also use it for cutting the mortises. Well, that came out way too loose. Let's see. Oh, this mortise is about 15 millimeters, supposed to be 12.5. Part of it was I was wiggling inside the slot and I had too much vibration. I made this template adjustable, so the further back on it I cut, the bigger it is and the bigger a tenon I get. So to be on the safe side, I cut it in the largest setting, but my tenon came out too small, which means either I need a slightly bigger tenon template or a slightly bigger follower. Oh, I noticed the other problem I've got here is I've got a bit of wiggle room, and that will also make for a slightly smaller tenon. I thought by tightening this enough I would get rid of this wiggle, but it looks like I can't. The problem is I cut this hole a little bit too inaccurate. I think I just have to make that hole lever again. But for now I'm just going to stick a nail in here, and that cuts out the wiggle room. So I cut out a tenon with the larger follower, and it came out way too big, and that tells me the problem is entirely this wiggle room. That's why it came out too small. So now going back to that first follower, the one that I made it for, with the nail in it, and recutting the tenon and seeing how large that comes out. Unfortunately, I ran out of room on the flash card, and the camera never tells me when that happens. It just stops recording. But I've got my tenon here. I recut the mortise. I still had some vibrations on here, and it seems to fit now. So this clever way of locking this shaft on here really hasn't worked out very well, so it really wasn't that clever. And this one was actually much easier to make, so I'll just make this whole lever again, making it like this. I've got the new handle installed, and I was just checking some more and checking the vertical travel. I noticed that chuck moves away from the square as it moves up. And I think what happened here is that this mount is a little bit too high and I need to lower it a little bit. I cut another tenon and it came out very nice looking, except it seems to be slanted like this. This is narrower here than it is here. And checking the template, that is nice and level with respect to the table, so it's some kind of inaccuracy with the pantograph itself. What can cause the tenon to be slanted like that is if the main pivot, the router, and the follower are not in a straight line with each other. That way, as the whole mechanism tilts, if this router, say, is off this way a little bit, that moves it up and down as it goes side to side. It's really hard to check all these things in place, so I'm going to take this thing apart and check the links individually. I've been carefully examining this link and this link to see if everything is in line. And on this one, I think this shaft might be off by about 0.5 millimeter out of line. And then on here, I found that the front of the router is a little bit too far this way by about 0.2 millimeters. Both of those would contribute, and then this template actually is a very tiny bit crooked. If I just put this on the table here and look over it like this, I can see that the right side is maybe 0.5 millimeter higher than the left side. Now I just need to shim it a little bit. Okay, that doesn't look like it's crooked anymore. This edge is nice and parallel to this edge. Same on this side. I think one thing that made this sample actually look worse than it is that this piece of wood is actually wedge-shaped. It's a bit thicker on this side than it is on this side. So as it comes up this way, that adds to the slope of that tenon. Plus I had the tenon template on there slightly crooked, and a tiny bit of error in here and here, and all those just added up. I think I'm done tweaking this thing for now. Accurate enough. In my next video, I'll make a plunge lever that'll allow me to plunge with a bit more control and depth stops so that I don't have to put a little clamp on there to control how far this is going to go in.